and keep this one short. I know we always say that, but we're aiming for
Right.
a nice little 30-minute episode, just cover both of the games and move on. But let's go ahead and let's start with that Iowa State game, because that was one where I thought this was going to be a test. And we talked about this going into it. They're going to be juiced up and ready to go, coming off of a loss to the worst team in the league in Texas Tech, where they were up 20 and let them come back and win. They had all week to mull on it and practice hard and get ready to come back home to the Hilton Magic and host the Kansas Jayhawks. You knew that they were going to be juiced up and ready to go. Now, Kansas coming off of a little bit of a bounce back against Kentucky and then at home against Kansas State. But against Kansas State, they shot lights out. So it was at home against Kansas State. You kind of expect, okay, you're going to win that almost every time when you shoot like that in Allen Fieldhouse. This was a big test for them. And I must say they did not pass the test from start to finish. It was not very good, not very pretty. A lot of those guys that you were hoping to get continued production out of did not give you that continued production. It almost looked like the confidence that was gained over those two games in the win streak immediately reversed back to how it was looking on the losing streak. So I just want to get your thoughts a little bit on, what went wrong going into that. Do you think it was just another off night? Have we just had quite a few off nights in the past, 5-6 games, or, what do you think went wrong up there?
Well, I can tell you, you and I have to have another discussion at some point about, is this team better than last year's team? Because I think we need to revisit that.
Yeah, we should sometime. Yeah,
at some point. When you're watching the game, it's just so frustrating because there's so many times where it felt like there was a chance, and we've said this a million times, it feels like, but it felt like there was a chance to be able to really piggyback or build on some momentum when they were able to put together a couple of buckets, and then something screwy would happen, and the next thing you know, you're saying there was a turnover, a really bad unforced error of a turnover, and then you're thinking, well, that's essentially was a 4-point play because they got the ball and went down to the other end and scored a bucket. So what's really plaguing this team is that they're just not making shots the way they know that they can. And they're turning the ball over way too much. I mean, 20 turnovers against Iowa State is unacceptable. And the thing that's happening is that in Iowa State, TCU did the same thing, but Iowa State, they take those turnovers and turn that into points on the other end. So you're often, over and over and over again, you're not you're taking bad shots, not making it, and they're getting that ball and they're going. And I don't know what is going. You've got to tell me, what do they do for transition defense in practice? Because did they just rip that out of the practice schedule and just decide that we're just not going to work on transition D, because they have been horrendous over the past 4 or 5 weeks.
No, I agree, and especially
it's not good.
Yeah, and I agree that transition defense, especially in the road Big 12 games, it seems like I remember Kansas State did it against them, and then now Iowa State. It's just like they get out and go. And to answer your question, as far as in practice, we would always do this drill. I don't know if you used to do this back in the day, but you would start 5-on-5, 5 on the baseline, 5 at the free throw line, and then we throw the ball to one guy, and then whoever was guarding the ball had to go touch the baseline while everybody else took off. And so that was kind of our transition defense. And I'm sure, knowing Coach Self and them, after giving up the amount of transition buckets they have, they've been working on that. Something that kind of stood out to me was just like you said, the missed shots, and then it almost looked like one of those things where people were shooting hoping that it would just turn around, like, let's get this back, and I'm going to shoot, and I know that it's been not going in or breaking every single time. Let me see if this is the one that changes it. And it just wasn't. And that's not the way to get your confidence back. I mean, I understand shooters shoot and whatnot. There's a specific few people who can just keep shooting and just assume that, okay, like eventually they'll start going in. A lot of these guys, it was like they were putting the shot up, and if I'm watching on TV, assuming that it's going to be a miss, I can only imagine, what they're feeling too. And I just
Right.
feel like there needs to be better ways to get people into a rhythm. And you have Jalen Wilson, who that game was his normal self, just scoring
Right.
on the regular. It feels like some of these other supporting guys need to figure out in those games where, okay, our shots aren't going down. Jalen's doing his thing. We got to support him a little bit. There has to be some ways to get easy buckets. And, in for me and in my day, it was like maybe an easy angle or post up, or some of those wing guys, we would run an action that got them going to the rim to hopefully get to the free throw line or something. It just feels like outside of Jalen, there's not really anybody else who's able to get easy buckets, super easy. Like the bigs can get it off of some screen and roll type actions and stuff like that. But I'm saying, you have the ball and you have a chance to shoot it, but your shot's not going in. How are you going to play off of that? And,
Right.
I feel like those supporting guys need to figure out a way to get themselves in some kind of rhythm that doesn't include, I'm going to just keep putting up a shot, hoping that it goes in.
Right. Well, and the thing is too is that points in the paint is a huge stat, and
Mhm.
the problem that I'm seeing is that old school Bill Self basketball used to have the two bigs, right?
Mhm.
I remember watching when you were in high school. And we're just like,
Yeah,
my
like
God, look at that! They just throw the
high
ball
low
to
action
the
and
bigs,
stuff.
high
Yeah.
low action. I mean, it's look at all that action inside. Well, why did he do that? Well, it just opens everything up for those shooters on the perimeter. Now, when you don't have that, you still need to get points in the paint somehow. And people
Mhm.
think automatically points in the paint means that you are throwing the ball inside to a big man who's scoring. And it doesn't have to be that. It can you can enter the paint via the pass, or you can enter the paint via the dribble.
Mhm.
But scoring around the basket, getting easier buckets. KU is shooting a bunch of threes, fall away threes, contested threes, quick threes. And this is the other thing too that I was watching. And I'm going, you know, eh, you start thinking about the secondary offense, and the whole reason for secondary offense is you want to be able to get down the court quickly and hope that you can get them while they're kind of shifting through, trying to find out where they're at, and try and get a quick bucket, right? Move that ball side to side a little bit very quickly. But once that initial action has happened and they've established a defense, well, then let's actually now run a play or move that ball to try to get an open shot. And there
Mhm.
were times when it looked like they would take a contested shot early in the shot clock that they could have gotten 20 seconds later.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it just feels like something is just not in rhythm.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's something that will just all of a sudden magically change, or if you know what I mean. Like, coaches I know is seeing that. What do you think they're saying to them when they get back to those huddles and practice tomorrow or the next day?
I mean, there has to be some emphasis on just, like you said, creating some of those other shots. The biggest concern is this game happening in March, because that you seem to have one of those games where your shots just aren't falling and you have to figure out a different way to score and grind it out. And if you have one of these games where it's just shots aren't falling and it's all Jalen and nobody else can really give him any help in the tournament, that's those games that you go home on,
Right.
and you don't want to have that happen. You have to have some second, third, fourth options of ways to get buckets. And so, I would hope that it's something they're working on and something that they're just trying to figure out, okay, what are some easy ways we can get some other guys involved, provide some help to Jalen. But it was a bad loss there in Ames, and coming back home as we transition to Texas,
Right.
I wasn't quite sure. They came home as pretty decent favorites, surprisingly, against number 5 Texas. And then it got announced that Zach Clements was out, Bobby Pettiford was out, um, not Uday, but Zuby was out as well. So you have a bench that I believe was shortened to 8 guys on scholarship. And it was one of those backs against the wall type situation where I'm like, okay, they're in Allen Fieldhouse. Coach Self is usually pretty good in these situations and getting people ready. As a player, you kind of like that because it's like, it's almost how I felt at Kentucky when we went there
Right.
one year where we had the short bench and a lot of people didn't expect us to win that after coming off the loss. And it was like, okay, we got to pull it together and grind this out. And that's the kind of environment that Coach Self sets up. So I knew that they were going to come out and perform well, but I didn't know that they were going to come out and cruise to a win with Jalen Wilson having 2 points the whole game.
Right.
2 points. I mean, it was one of the more impressive wins I've seen this year. And you just said earlier, how is this team compared to last year's and stuff? We got to talk about that again. Yeah, I've kind of wavered in my opinion throughout this year. I'm not going to lie. But I will say last night gave me a ton of confidence that, hey, this is showing our potential, as we move forward. If we can get that kind of production out of Uday, get that kind of production out of Yesufu. I mean, don't get that kind of the way that Grady played with confidence, the way that you saw Dwan Harris just control the game in every aspect and stuff. You did all of that against the number 5 team with Jalen Wilson being a non-factor on offense, a non-factor. And I believe he was maybe the lowest scorer in the game, if not tied for it or something. They had quite a few guys in double digits. He was definitely not one of them. And they still found a way to win. That was the type of game that I thought was really interesting to see because we haven't seen that really to this point. And to see those guys step up on with a short bench, I thought was really impressive. And it made me feel like, okay, we're seeing a little bit of where this team's potential could be.
Right. Now I can tell you they jumped out to the big lead, which was really nice to see because they had been on the other end of that stick for so many games. Yeah. So that was really nice to see, and they had the lead at halftime. But what happened in the second half? I mean, it's like next thing you know, they started allowing them to chip away and chip away and chip away to the point where it actually made it a game. So you used the word cruise. I don't know if I would say they cruised to a win. I would say that
they were ahead.
Business.
Yeah, I mean, they were ahead for like almost the whole 40 minutes. So that's what I mean by cruise. But yes, they went on a run. They weathered the storm, though, which I think shows a lot.
Right.
They weathered the storm. But yeah, Texas did make quite a run in the second half to cut it. I believe they tied the game, maybe even took the lead for.
I think they took the lead by 1. I think at one point in the second half. But you talk about taking blows and withstanding and all of that, and so they did. I mean, Texas did similar, and I can't remember who they were playing, where they were down big and they came back to win the game. So, and that's a really good team too, Texas. I mean, so we're talking about essentially a top 10 team in the country that they beat. So I was really encouraged to see that. But the biggest thing that I think I was the most encouraged with is essentially what you talked about. The fact that it's not just the Jalen Wilson show, and that is it. Because it has been this entire time. And so you saw the rest of them say, okay, he's not hitting his shots. I'm going to hit mine. And I'm going to do what I need to do. And, even Dwan Harris was doing his thing. And they only had 11 turnovers for the game, which is, again, was what you want. And so defensively, turnovers, transition defense. I mean, it's like they did all the things that they can do. The biggest question I have is why did they not do it so often? I mean, they had the skill set to do it. We know that, but it's like everybody has an off game, right? Every team has an off game or maybe a couple or something like that. But their pendulum seems to swing so much between those real positive, great games and not looking very good. And this was the 48 hours apart.
Yeah, I would say it's a few things. One, I give some credit to Allen Fieldhouse. As we've talked about before, teams just feel different sometimes, especially if you jump on them early and you have the crowd into it and stuff. That can help. You just noticed in the Kansas State game and the Texas game, the last 2 home games, all those things that you said were positive, those were at home and in that environment and stuff. It just feels easier to get out and run, play defense, all that stuff. Where I really think this came from, though, and this is going to be important moving forward, and I'm curious how you would handle this as a coach, but I was trying to get into, okay, how did this bench just show out? They showed out against Kansas State, but they really showed out the other night, it wasn't just the bench, but just the supporting cast, but also the bench. And without the minutes that you got from Uday and from Yesufu and from MJ as well, they don't win that game the way that they do.
Right.
What I look at the way I look at it is that these guys went into this game with they didn't have to look over their shoulder at all, and I think that there's something to be said about that, because I've seen these guys, they're freshmen, they're young guys. Obviously, Yesufu is a transfer, but these guys have been having to look over their shoulder, for that yank nonstop.
Right.
And that changes it. And I even remember when I was out there watching the shoot around, and I noticed that Joe's demeanor was just, he felt kind of down because he would make a mistake and immediately, coach would yank him out and go, put him back on the red team and this and that. That's tough to deal with going into a game, because then, in that game, you go in, you make one mistake, it's like, all right, there's other options, get him out the game, put somebody else in. I felt like the other night it was kind of like, okay, it's on you. Coach Self probably let them know before, hey, you're going to have to play some significant minutes. Go out there and play loose and free. That showed a lot from these guys. And moving forward, I'm kind of curious, at what point does Coach Self start shortening this bench lineup a little bit and start playing that a few guys more minutes, to letting them know that, hey, you got my full vote of confidence. Go out there. You're going to play in, 5-10 spurts or whatever, but you're not going to have to worry about it if you make a mistake immediately being subbed out and stuff. Moving forward, I'm curious how he handles that, because I saw a lot of confidence starting to be built last night that you can continue to build off of and progress as the season moves forward. And you're going to need that come tournament time, because those minutes are very, very valuable. And the progression of the freshmen and MJ and Uday, and then Yesufu providing that spark off the bench where he comes out and he gets those buckets and has that energy. You want that confidence in those guys to come out and provide those minutes. And you're going to need that as you move into March.
Right, 100%. I can tell you that needing that energy is so crucial, because every game, every season is just going to have these almost lags in them, and so when you get sparks like that off the bench, it truly is amazing. Now to answer your question, I think I'm gonna use an analogy here, because I'm the champion of my fantasy football league, and the league in which you are in as well. I'm the champ right now for this year. And when I think about this, I want to throw this back at you. If there was some player who scored 3 touchdowns, who's wide receiver, scored 3 touchdowns in a game, but he was on nobody's roster. He was on waivers, because nobody ever even thought about the fact that this person could be a contributor. Would you run out, pick that person up, and stick them into your starting lineup the very next game? Well, the answer is probably no. Well, you might, because you're not that really great at this. But
my team sucks, so yes, I probably would have had to.
Yeah, because your team is so bad. But so to answer your question, it's about trust. You have to build that trust, because all of a sudden that person comes on the bench. They do 3. You're like, all of a sudden the next week they get 1, and they go, maybe, and then all of a sudden you like, well, let me just put them on my bench, and then okay, let me start this person, because they've shown it. And I think that's what you're going to find here, is that Self is smart enough to know that, yes, these guys came in and did what they needed to do for this game, this environment, this game script, because of the injuries. But can I trust that in March or not? I think the verdict's still out on who and when and all of that. So I think what you're going to find is maybe they're switching over, from red to blue a little bit more in practice. Maybe they do get an extra couple minutes here and there, but I don't think you're going to see any real wholesale changes to the lineups quite yet.
Yeah, I just hope that it, more than anything, it's just that kind of looking over your shoulder stuff and playing with that confidence. I don't think it would be a bad thing if these guys, got another game or 2 with those 3 guys, sitting it out, getting healthy, because if that's the case, it just gives them more time to show that. You know,
Right.
the last thing you want is to have this kind of run of confidence into these guys, and then immediately these, the guys who were hurt come back, and then they go out there and make one mistake or miss a shot, and they're looking over to the bench because they're getting yanked for somebody else. So it's just, I hope that those guys take advantage of this time because, as you said, especially right now, they're getting way more run with the starters. They're going to get way more playing time in games. It's about taking advantage of that. And hopefully this will give them some confidence to know that, hey, if you can continue to show this, you're not going to have to look over your shoulder anymore. And come March, Coach Self is one of those coaches that will put full confidence into 7 or 8 guys come March, and you will know that you could mess up or whatever. He's not going to be looking towards the end of the bench to try to find a solution. You'll have your opportunities to get back into the flow of the games and make up for those mistakes because he doesn't like to play around with lineups and stuff too much. And I felt that as a player, my final 3 years, come March, I knew that, okay, I'm in the game and I'm staying in the game for good chunks of time. And I didn't have to worry about that. Whereas early in the season and midpoint of the season, there was a lot of that, something messed up.
Yeah,
I'm coming out.
I get you, because as soon as you do something, I mean, you could almost hear the horn.
Yes.
Without even looking, you knew who was coming in for you. I mean, So I get it, but don't you think that there's a little bit of that's how you grow and that's how you get better, is to be challenged like that. I mean, I understand the not wanting to look over your shoulder, but if that that's coming, then you start making sure that you're in position, making sure you're getting those rebounds. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I don't want to make it so that, he has to, baby you to say, okay, well, it's okay. I mean, come on now. These are big time athletes who have to play at a really high level. And I just need to know if you can do it or not. And if you can't do it, I'm going to look down the bench. And so you showed that you could do it. And that's why you earned that trust.
I looked at somebody like Yesufu, though, who, like he's shown in his days before coming to Kansas, the reason he was able to transfer to a school like Kansas, that he has the ability. And you've seen it in a game like the other night where he came and provided such a spark. But you also see that it's tough, especially as someone like, it may be different from me or somebody that's like, okay, my job is to go in there and get rebounds, play defense, stuff like that. But for somebody who's like, you come off the bench, you provide a scoring spark, this and that, it's tough because that one miss is going to feel like, like you just missed 5 in a row. And that plays a role. And, at the end of the day, we're dealing with college kids, they're not quite professional athletes or anything yet.
Right.
There's confidence that plays a role in this. And especially for guys who provide scoring off the bench in limited minutes, they have to have that feeling that, hey, I'm not coming out first miss,
Right.
and I remember back in my day, somebody who comes to mind when I'm saying this is Brennan Green, who was one of the best shooters I've ever played with before, could not miss. But he had such a short leash for so many different reasons that if he did miss, because that's what he was in the game to do, was shoot the shot. If he missed, it felt that like, okay, his confidence went down a little bit. Coach's confidence in him went down. Like you felt like, okay, he's probably going to come out the game soon because he's not doing the one thing that he's in there to do. And so, yeah, it's a balance. I think that you're right. There's a mix of it. You have to be able to not look over your shoulder and go in there. And even if you are looking over, do everything right. But everything's not always going to go right. And, things are going to go wrong sometimes. And these guys are playing spot minutes here and there. Confidence is a big thing for that, those spot minutes. And they don't get the luxury of being a starter where you get into the game flow. You make a mistake. Oh, well, I'm going to get it back. I know I can get it back, this and that. You make a mistake, you may be in your mind like, oh, I'm going to get it back this next play. And you won't even get a chance. You'll be on the end of the bench before that next play even gets started. And so that's something that I think it's a balance. And I think that shows you why come March, he's not mixing it up anymore because Coach Self knows that as well. He knows that plays a role. And so he tweaks and toys with the lineup all year long. But come March, you don't see him going to the 9th man, and saying, hey, we're going to sub him in for, the first big off the bench, instead of going to him, we're going to yank him and put the ninth man in. You don't see that as much come tournament time. And I think that shows, his experience with college kids and college basketball, how important, that mental mindset can also play into things as well.
Well, 100%. But guys like Brendan Green, I mean, that's what he was brought to do. So I mean, if you're not making shots, whether it's the first shot, or not, I mean.
But it can't be one. I mean, you can't have one.
He doesn't take you out.
He may not take him out, but I bet you Brennan would start looking to the bench, or at least get in his head about it after one miss. And that one miss could go in and out and just be the luck of the bounce there. But it's like, okay, you had a wide open shot that you're supposed to, knock down, and you didn't. Right. And by the way, we have a stud on the bench that we can bring off, replace in Svi or Wayne or anybody. Right. We'll go to the bench and bring somebody off. Whereas, like, if they don't have that luxury, if you're at some other school, or if those guys are injured, or if you just know, hey, I'm playing for this stretch of 10 minutes, you come right back and say, I'm good. I'm not coming. They're not bringing somebody off the bench for me anytime soon. I think that plays something, somewhat of a factor. And I think you see that. I mean, I thought we saw it last night. Those guys came in, played with confidence, and small mistakes never really seemed like the biggest deal.
So can we just chat a little bit about overall defense for just a second?
Yeah.
So, we've been talking about offense. We've been talking about hitting shots and all of that. And I understand that piece. And sometimes that happens. The ball goes through the hoop, and sometimes it doesn't. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But, it does feel like on the defensive end that this is not the prototypical Bill Self team. And I say that because I feel like defensively, they don't lock down guys one-on-one nearly as well as they other teams have in the past. Obviously don't have a real rim protector, which is not that big of a deal, but it's just, I'm saying, just traditionally, and the thing is that I was thinking about the Iowa State game and the fact that the Iowa State would throw it into their big, and because they defensively they had to double team, which again, I know that was your big thing. Don't you dare. I don't need any help. But they're giving KJ that help, that he needs. And then obviously they're scrambling, because he did actually a pretty good job of either kicking the ball back out or looking opposite or something like that. It just feels like the defense is not quite there. Mm-hmm. Am I reading into this wrong, or you know what I mean? Or am I missing something? Because it doesn't feel like this is, a truly Bill Self defensive team.
I don't think you're reading into it wrong. I think that with Coach Self and all the teams I was on, you would notice a significant progression as the season went along and coming into February and March. For this time of the year, I think that you would have to start seeing some significant improvements, which I don't know if we've seen a ton of. The thing that stands out to me more than anything is that keeping your man in front of you thing. And just having that idea that he would always tell us, assume if you're on the ball that you have no help, and if you're off the ball that guy's going to get beat every single time. Right. That's just the principle you should always play with. And, I think that there's a little bit that you can improve on in practice, but it's really going to come from just these guys locking in. They have the capability. I mean, it's not like this team doesn't have defenders. You have some really solid defenders who are capable of keeping their guys in front of them. It's just about really, taking that pride in it. And I think you'll see improvements as it goes along. And as March comes along and the tournament time, you would hope that they would be ready. If they're not, then they're going to get exposed in the tournament and they'll go home early. So hopefully they understand that. But it is something that you always see it with Coach Self teams. And I don't know what it is, if it's just us learning through film, through practice, whatever it is. For some reason, it's like you would build up all year, and then you would reset at the beginning of the year, then you would build up all year. But come tournament time, you usually are in the right position, moving around. Everybody's communicating well. I think communication is a big thing as well. That's something that I noticed a little bit of a lack of in the practices that I saw, was just, that's the easiest time to hear it is just in practice because it's quiet in there, but just talking, just constant communication, talking that not only is good just for your teammates to understand what's going on, how you're guarding screens, but it also just keeps you more locked in. The more you're talking, the more you're locked into that play and in an active position. So I'm not hitting any panic buttons yet. I think that this team has all the necessary pieces. I don't see any like super glaring holes. Yeah, they can't really keep their man in front of them super well, but I've seen worse. And I think that it's something that they can improve on. And I just have to trust Coach Self in this one and trust that he'll figure something out and that these guys will figure it out. As far as the post goes, I mean, yeah, you have to scramble and double team it because I've watched them play the post. Uday he's in the right position sometimes and then will just make bad decisions because he's a freshman and just doesn't understand. And then KJ, he actually does a solid job and will wall up and do everything that's necessary. It's just that his wall up is several inches shorter than most bigs. And so a jump hook over him is kind of like doing a jump hook on dummy defense sometimes because it's just not really creating much in the way of somebody's jump hook or shot. So I think it's something that they'll be able to work on and figure out, and I'm not super worried about it just yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad you're not.
You are? Yeah.
Well, I just because also, they're doing the whole the switching all, right? So they're doing a lot of switching, or sometimes they'll do switching four, but most of the time they're switching everything. And that level of communication is massive. And pointing and making sure that guys are, you're taking this guy, I'm taking this guy. And it doesn't seem like it, so I'm not really judging that part because I do think they do a pretty good job with that. And there's not, every once in a while there'll be a broken switch or something and somebody will roll, uncontested to the hoop. But I just don't feel like there's that level of intensity or pride on the defensive end. It feels like these are the type of players that will do what they need to. Don't get me wrong, they're not horrible. Like you said, you've seen worse, I've seen worse. But they're offensive-minded players who will do the defense because they have to play defense on the ball. They can't just sub out every single time, right? And so it feels like that's a little bit of a change from we're a defensive-minded team that's going to use defense to transition to offense, on the other end. So I don't know. I may be reading into a little bit more than I need to, but it just feels like there's something that level of intensity doesn't seem to be there like it should be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see how they do moving forward and into, it's crazy how close to March we are. I mean, we're getting very close to March, and their next few games, they have Oklahoma State. So they play the two Oklahoma teams on the road. So I think this is a good challenge. It's not going to be the top competition in the league, but it is still the Big 12. So every game you have to take serious, but it's also a chance to work on some stuff. It's a chance for guys to get some confidence. It's a chance to figure out on the road, getting back right, because it seems like the last few road games have not been too well in the Big 12. Obviously, the Kentucky game was a great one, but outside of that, they haven't been doing too well. So get back on track with that, and then get ready for the home stretch that is going to be a big one. This league is a grind, and if they want that number one seed, they're probably going to have to win or tie for the lead of the league. And so, it's going to be important. We'll see how they do. I'm hoping that next time we meet, they got two nice little road wins, and we can be talking about, how great they're playing moving into March. I can be back on board with the fact that I think this team is better than last year and all that great fun stuff. But yeah, no, it was, I thought this week to split it, and especially the way that the game went last night against Texas, I thought there's a lot of positives you can take from it moving forward. I think that they will take a lot of positives. And yet again, playing on Big Monday is tough, but if you can get away with a win like they did, you get all week to rest and recover. You get all week to work on things, to watch film, and I think that these weeks are really important, in this time of the season. So I'm gonna wrap it up at that because my nose is starting to get real plugged right now, and I'm gonna have to.
So wait. I thought we had a guest coming on. Do we don't have a guest?
Okay, come on now.
Oh, maybe next week.
Maybe next. I'm always like, all right, yeah. As soon as we get off this, I'm gonna get it done, and then I get off, and I got Isaiah running up, Dad, and next thing you know, kids, and the last thing on my mind is getting a guest for the following week. So,
all right.
But anyways, no, this was good. Pretty short for the most part, and we'll be back again next week with a new episode.
It's good. See you then.